Welcome to another story with K Whisper. Today, we bring you a tales of a journey of heartbreak, sacrifice, and a love that defied even death itself. So grab your popcorn, relax, and let's step into this unforgettable story. In the dazzling skyscrapers of Seoul, Min-joon's name carried weight. He wasn't just another businessman. He was the man who had built an empire from the ground up, the billionaire CEO whose decisions shaped markets and influenced lives. His suits were stitched in Italy, his cars imported from Germany, and his home was a glass palace that overlooked the Han River. From the outside, his life looked perfect. He had wealth, power, respect, and a wife admired for her beauty and elegance. Together, they were seen as Seoul's golden couple. But illusions do not last forever. It began quietly, almost unnoticed. Fatigue, shortness of breath, a dull ache in his side. At first, Min-joon dismissed it, too many late nights at the office, too much stress. But as days turned into weeks, the pain became louder, harder to ignore, until even he, a man who controlled billion-dollar deals with a flick of his pen, could no longer control his own body. One morning, after nearly collapsing in a board meeting, Min-joon was rushed to the hospital. Tests were run, machines beeped, doctors whispered. When the results came, the truth was devastating. His kidneys were failing. Without a transplant, he had less than 30 days to live. Hearing those words was like watching his empire crumble in front of his eyes. For the first time in his life, no amount of money or influence could change the outcome. But the cruelest blow was yet to come. His wife visited him that evening. Min-joon looked at her with tired eyes, expecting comfort, a hand to hold, someone to stand beside him in this storm. Instead, her voice was cold, her words sharp. "I can't do this. I can't watch you die. I'm too young to be a widow. I'm leaving." She turned and walked out of the hospital room, her heels clicking against the floor, her perfume lingering in the air. She didn't look back. She didn't kiss him goodbye. She simply left, leaving behind a broken man who had once been untouchable. In that moment, Min-joon realized how fragile life truly was. Money had bought him everything, except loyalty, except love. The days that followed blurred into one another. The hospital room became his prison, a world of sterile walls and humming machines. He stared out the window at the city he once ruled, now reduced to a spectator in his own life. Nurses came and went, their faces indistinct, their voices fading into the background. Nothing mattered anymore. Until one evening, when the door opened and in walked someone who would change everything. Her name was Abisola. She was unlike the others. She didn't rush through her duties, nor did she treat him as if he were already halfway to the grave. Her eyes carried warmth, her voice carried calm, and her hands carried compassion. She introduced herself with a gentle smile, a smile that felt real, unpolished, human. At first, Min-joon ignored her. His pride was shattered, his heart closed off. What could a nurse offer a man who had only 30 days left to live? But Abisola didn't give up. When he refused food, she encouraged him with quiet persistence. When he turned his face away, she filled the silence with stories of her homeland, painting pictures of wide African skies and sunsets that set the earth ablaze. When the pain became unbearable, she held his hand, grounding him in ways medicine never could. Little by little, something inside him began to stir. For the first time since his diagnosis, Min-joon felt seen. Not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, not even as a dying man, but as a human being. And yet, behind Abisola's gentle smile lay her own secrets. Secrets she had never shared with anyone. As Min-joon's days slipped away, as the countdown toward his final breath grew louder, fate was weaving their destinies together in a way neither of them could have foreseen. Because Abisola was about to make a choice that would change both of their lives forever. The days moved slowly, each one stealing a little more of Min-joon's strength. His body grew weaker, his skin pale, his once powerful frame reduced to fragility. Yet, while his strength drained away, something else quietly grew in its place. A connection. Abisola never treated him like a billionaire who had lost everything. She treated him like a man who still deserved to live. She teased him gently when he refused to eat, coaxing a smile from lips that had forgotten how. She told him stories late into the night, stories about her childhood, her struggles, her victories. She spoke of Lagos, the city where she was born, its streets alive with music, its people resilient and vibrant. She spoke of her mother's cooking, the smell of spicy jollof rice filling their small home. She spoke of a sky filled with stars so bright they seemed to touch the earth. And Min-joon listened. Really listened. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about mergers, acquisitions, or quarterly reports. He was simply a man, lost in another world painted by the voice of a woman who saw him not as a dying patient, but as someone worth remembering. At first, he tried to fight the feelings that stirred inside him. He told himself it was gratitude, nothing more. But gratitude doesn't make your heart race when someone walks into the room. Gratitude doesn't make you stay awake just to hear their voice one more time before you close your eyes. It was more. It was dangerous. It was impossible. And yet, it was undeniable. Abisola noticed the change too. She saw the way his eyes lingered on her, the way he asked questions about her life, questions that went beyond small talk. She should have kept her distance, but something about him drew her in. She had cared for countless patients, but none had reached her heart like this man. Perhaps it was his vulnerability, hidden beneath layers of pride and brokenness. Perhaps it was the way he listened to her as if her words were treasures. Or perhaps it was the silent strength she saw in him, even as his body betrayed him. But time was their enemy. Every day the doctors came with the same updates. No donor match had been found. The transplant list was long, and Min-joon's name was buried beneath thousands of others. The countdown was merciless. 20 days left. 19. 18. Min-joon began to prepare himself for the inevitable. One night, as the rain tapped against the hospital window, he confessed his fears to Abisola. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I thought I would live forever," he said. "Not literally, but I never imagined my empire would outlast me. I was so busy building my world that I forgot to live in it. And now it's slipping away." Abisola listened, her heart aching. She wanted to promise him that everything would be fine, but she had seen too many patients fade away to offer false hope. Instead, she placed her hand gently over his. "You're still here, Min-joon," she said softly. "That means you still have something left to fight for." He looked at her, his eyes filled with exhaustion, but also with something else. A spark. "What if I have nothing?" he asked. "Then make something," she replied. "Even if it's small. Even if it's just one memory. Life isn't measured by the years we have, but by the moments we create." Her words sank deep into him. And for the first time since his diagnosis, he began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, life still had meaning. But as their bond grew stronger, his health grew worse. His body began to fail him faster. He grew weaker, his breath shorter, his pain sharper. Each morning, he woke up surprised that he was still alive. One afternoon, Min-joon collapsed while trying to walk across his hospital room. Alarms blared, nurses rushed in, doctors shouted orders. Abisola was at his side, holding his hand as his consciousness faded. When he opened his eyes hours later, she was still there, her fingers intertwined with his. Her face was pale, her eyes red from tears. "You scared me," she whispered. "I scare myself," he replied, his voice barely audible. Then, after a pause, he added, "Don't cry for me. Not yet." Abisola squeezed his hand tighter, but she said nothing. That night, after ensuring he was stable, she left the room and went straight to the hospital's testing lab. She had made up her mind. She would take the test to see if she was a match. It was a reckless decision. Donating a kidney was no small thing. But something deep inside her told her it was the right choice. Something told her that this man, this broken billionaire with less than a month to live, was worth the risk. Days later, the results came back. Against all odds, she was a match. When she saw the paper in her hands, her heart pounded. Relief. Fear.
hope.
It all collided inside her. She sat in silence, staring at the results, knowing that her decision would change not just his life, but hers too. But she didn't tell him. Not yet. She knew he would refuse. She knew his pride would stand in the way. So she waited, carrying the secret alone, as his time continued to run out. Min-joon sensed something had changed in her. He saw it in her eyes, the way she lingered at his side a little longer, the way her smile sometimes faltered when she thought he wasn't looking. But he was too weak to question it, too consumed by the ticking clock of his own mortality. And so, as the days fell away, as death crept closer, neither of them knew that destiny had already drawn the lines of their story. A story of sacrifice, love, and a choice that would bind their lives forever. The hospital room grew quieter with each passing day, as if even the walls knew Min-joon's time was slipping away. Machines hummed softly, monitors beeped in steady rhythm, and the once proud man who had commanded boardrooms now struggled just to lift a glass of water. Abisola stayed by his side more often than she should have. Other nurses noticed, whispering about her unusual dedication to one patient, but she didn't care. Something inside her refused to walk away. She had seen countless patients before, but none had reached her soul the way Min-joon had. She carried the test results in her bag everywhere she went, folded neatly, hidden away like a dangerous secret. She read them over and over in stolen moments, as if hoping the words would change. But they never did. Compatible. She was his match. Every time she looked at him, weak and fading, she wanted to shout the truth. She wanted to tell him he didn't have to die, that there was hope, that his story didn't have to end here. But the words caught in her throat. She knew him well enough by now to understand how he would react. Min-joon's pride ran deep, even in weakness. He would never allow her to make such a sacrifice. He would rather face death than take something so precious from her. And so she stayed silent, carrying the burden alone. Min-joon, meanwhile, felt the clock ticking. His body was betraying him, faster with each passing day. Some mornings he woke with a pounding in his chest, convinced his heart was giving out. Other times, he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it would feel to take his last breath. Yet in those moments, it wasn't death that haunted him most. It was the thought of leaving her behind. He never said it out loud, but the truth was there in the way he looked at her. The way his eyes softened when she entered the room. The way his lips curved into the faintest smile when she adjusted his blanket. The way his hand lingered a little too long when hers brushed against it. He was falling, against all reason, against all logic. He was falling for her. And Abisola, she was falling too. But love is cruel when shadowed by time. Their connection deepened even as the number of days he had left dwindled. 10 days.
9. 8.
By the 7th day, his condition took a sharp turn. His body could no longer keep up. He grew delirious, his mind clouded by toxins his kidneys could no longer filter. Some days he barely recognized the people around him. But even in his haze, he always knew Abisola. One evening, as she sat beside him, he turned his head weakly toward her. His eyes, though tired, still carried fire. "Why are you here?" he whispered. The question caught her off guard. "I'm your nurse," she answered softly. "No," he said, his voice barely more than breath. "You're more than that. Why are you really here?" Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. The truth was too heavy, too dangerous to speak. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently and smiled through the ache in her chest. "Rest," she said. "You need your strength." But strength was something he no longer had. The following night, his condition collapsed further. His blood pressure plummeted. Alarm screamed. Doctors rushed in. Abisola was pushed aside as they worked frantically to stabilize him. She stood in the corner, her hands trembling, fear tearing her apart. For the first time, she felt the real possibility of losing him. And she realized she couldn't keep silent any longer. When the chaos settled and Min-joon drifted into an uneasy sleep, Abisola stepped out into the hallway. She unfolded the crumpled test results from her bag, staring at them under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her decision was no longer a choice. It was a calling. She would tell him. The next morning, she walked into his room with a calmness that didn't match the storm raging inside her. Min-joon was awake, weaker than ever, his breath shallow. He looked at her with tired eyes, a faint smile playing at his lips. "You came back," he said. "I'll always come back," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. She sat on the edge of his bed, her hands trembling as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper. For a moment, she just stared at it, unsure how to begin. Then she looked into his eyes and whispered the words that would change everything. "Min-joon, I'm your match." For a moment, silence filled the room. He blinked slowly, as if unsure he had heard correctly. "What?" he breathed. "I had the tests done," she said, unfolding the paper and placing it gently in his hand. "I can give you my kidney. I can save you." His fingers trembled as he held the results, his eyes scanning the words through tears that blurred his vision. Shock, relief, anger, gratitude. It all collided inside him. "No," he said finally, his voice firm despite his weakness. "I can't let you do this." "You don't have a choice," she said softly, her eyes steady. "I'm not watching you die, Min-joon. Not when I can stop it." Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks. He had been abandoned by the woman who vowed to stay with him, yet here was another, someone with no obligation, no promise, no reason to risk her life, and she was offering him everything. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Abisola reached out and touched his face gently, her thumb brushing away his tears. "Because you deserve a second chance," she said. "Because your story isn't finished. And because, whether you accept it or not, my heart won't let me lose you." His chest tightened, not from illness this time, but from the weight of her words. He wanted to refuse, to push her away, to protect her. But deep inside, a fragile hope began to bloom. For the first time in weeks, he believed he might live. The hours after Abisola's revelation were heavy with silence. Min-joon lay in his hospital bed, the paper still clutched in his trembling hand. The words on it burned into his mind. Compatible donor. He wanted to tear it apart, to reject it, to push her away. But every time he looked at Abisola, standing firm with quiet determination, he felt his resolve slipping. "No," he said again, his voice hoarse. "I won't let you do this. You don't understand what you're risking." "I understand perfectly," she answered. "I've seen the surgeries. I know the risks, and I'm willing to take them." "Why me?" His voice cracked, raw with desperation. "You could live your life free, whole. Why sacrifice yourself for a dying man?" She met his gaze steadily, her dark eyes unwavering. "Because you're not just a dying man. You're Min-joon. And I refuse to let your story end here." Her words shook him more than he wanted to admit. He turned his face away, staring at the ceiling, battling the storm raging inside him. Pride screamed at him to refuse. Fear told him to protect her. But something else whispered to him in the quiet moments. Something he had buried for too long.
Hope.
Over the next 2 days, Abisola worked relentlessly to convince him. She stayed by his side, reminding him of the moments still waiting for him, the sunsets he hadn't seen, the laughter he hadn't shared, the dreams he hadn't lived. But Min-joon's stubbornness was legendary. "You'll regret it," he said one night, his voice weak but steady. "When you wake up in pain, when you realize what you've given away, you'll regret it." Abisola shook her head. "The only thing I would regret is not trying. The only thing I would regret is letting you slip away when I could have saved you." And then, softly, almost like a confession, she added, "You matter to me, Min-joon. More than you know." His chest tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. He realized then that what he felt for her wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just admiration. It was love. A love that had crept in silently, growing stronger every day she refused to leave his side. On the 5th day after her revelation, Min-joon's condition plummeted. His body was shutting down faster than the doctors had predicted. His skin turned gray, his breathing shallow, his pulse faint. The doctors rushed in, their faces grim. "He won't make it another 48 hours without the transplant," one of them said. Abisola turned to Min-joon, her eyes filled with tears. "Please," she begged. "Let me save you." His pride, his fear, his doubts, all of it crumbled in that moment. He looked at her, at the woman who had stayed when everyone else had left, and he whispered the words she had been waiting to hear. "Do it." The decision was made. The paperwork was signed. Preparations began immediately. The night before the surgery, Abisola sat with him in the dim light of his room. The world outside the window was dark, but inside, a fragile peace settled between them. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he admitted. "Not of the surgery. Not of dying. I'm scared of losing you." Her heart ached at his words. She reached for his hand and held it tightly. "You won't lose me. I promise." He closed his eyes, savoring the warmth of her touch, memorizing the moment as if it might be his last. The morning of the surgery arrived too quickly. Min-joon was wheeled into the sterile white corridors, the hum of machines and the hurried footsteps of doctors echoing around him. Abisola followed closely, her hospital gown rustling as she walked, her face calm though her heart raced. In the operating room, the lights were blinding. The air smelled of antiseptic and cold steel. The surgeons stood ready, masks covering their expressions. As they prepared, Min-joon caught one last glimpse of Abisola across the room. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, 1,000 words were spoken. If this was the end, he wanted her to know he loved her. If this was the beginning, he wanted her by his side. The anesthesia pulled him into darkness. Hours passed. Knives cut, machines beeped, hands worked with precision. The surgeons moved quickly, every second vital. Abisola's kidney was removed with delicate care, carried across sterile hands, and placed into Min-joon's body. It was a battle between life and death, fought not with money or power, but with flesh and blood. There were moments when Min-joon's heart faltered, when monitors screamed, and the room filled with tension. Doctors barked orders, nurses scrambled, sweat dripped down masked faces. At one point, his pulse flatlined, and silence gripped the room like a fist.
But then a sound.
Faint, fragile, but steady.
Beep, beep, beep.
The monitors sang again. Against the odds, his body accepted the kidney. The billionaire who had once believed he was untouchable had been brought back, not by his wealth, but by the sacrifice of a woman who loved him enough to risk everything. When the surgery was finally over, Min-joon was wheeled into recovery, pale but alive. Abisola, too, was taken to her own recovery room, her body weakened but her spirit unbroken. The doctors exchanged relieved glances. Against all odds, both had survived. But survival was only the beginning. Because what awaited them outside the operating room was not just recovery but a future neither of them could have predicted. The days after the surgery felt like waking into a different world. For Min-joon, each breath was a miracle. The constant pain that had haunted him for weeks was gone, replaced with a fragile but steady strength. For the first time in months, his body was no longer his enemy. When he opened his eyes in the recovery room, the first thing he saw was Abisola lying in the bed beside his, her face pale but peaceful in sleep. He reached weakly for her hand, and even in her unconscious state, her fingers curled gently around his. She had given him life. He owed every heartbeat to her. In the weeks that followed, they healed together. They walked the hospital halls slowly, side by side, their steps unsteady but in rhythm. They ate simple meals, laughing when Min-joon tried to sneak sweets against the doctor's orders. At night, when the ward grew quiet, they talked for hours about the future, about dreams, about the second chance they had both been given. The bond that had begun in despair blossomed into something undeniable. Love, fragile at first, grew stronger with every passing day. When they were finally discharged from a hospital, Min-joon insisted on bringing Abisola into his world. Gone was the glass palace filled with emptiness. Now, the house overlooking the Han River became a place of warmth, filled with the sound of her laughter and the quiet comfort of her presence. He no longer cared about boardrooms and stock markets. What mattered now was life itself, and the woman who had given it back to him. One evening, weeks after their release, Min-joon planned a dinner at his home to celebrate her recovery. The dining room was bathed in golden light, the table set with her favorite dishes. For the first time in years, he wasn't surrounded by business associates or politicians. It was just the two of them, together, free of the hospital walls that had once confined their world. Abisola arrived in a simple dress, her smile radiant, though her eyes carried a shadow she had not yet shared. As they ate, Min-joon found himself watching her more than the food. The way she held her fork delicately, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the way her eyes glimmered in the candlelight. Every detail was etched into his memory, a reminder of how close he had come to losing her. When dessert arrived, he took her hand across the table. "Abisola," he said softly, "you've given me everything. My life, my future, my heart. I don't know how to thank you, but I know this. I don't want to imagine my days without you in them." Her breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. "Min-joon," she whispered. He leaned closer, his voice steady with emotion. "Stay with me. Not just tonight. Not just tomorrow. Stay with me for the rest of my life." For a moment, silence hung between them, filled with love, filled with promise. But then, Abisola's smile faded, replaced by something heavier. She withdrew her hand gently, lowering her gaze. "There's something I need to tell you," she said quietly. Min-joon's chest tightened. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling in her lap. Before all of this, there was someone else in my life. Someone I love deeply. Someone who depends on me." Min-joon's heart pounded, fear clawing at him. "Who?" he asked, his voice low. Her eyes lifted to meet his, shimmering with truth and vulnerability. "My child," she whispered. "I have a daughter." The words struck him like a thunderclap. A daughter. All this time, she had carried not just the weight of her sacrifice for him, but the responsibility of another life she hadn't revealed. His mind raced. Questions tumbled through his thoughts. Why hadn't she told him sooner? What would this mean for them? Could he truly share her with someone else, after believing she was his whole world? Abisola watched him carefully, her heart aching at the shock written across his face. "I wanted to tell you," she said softly. "But every time I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd walk away. I never wanted to burden you. Not when you were fighting for your life. But I can't hide it anymore. She's part of me. And if you love me, you have to love her too." The room was silent, except for the faint clinking of the silverware as Min-joon's hand trembled against the table. He looked at her, torn between the love blazing in his heart and the storm of uncertainty her confession had unleashed. Abisola's eyes filled with tears. "Say something," she whispered. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat was dry, his heart heavy. He loved her, of that he had no doubt. But now, the story was no longer just about the two of them. It was about a child. A family he had never expected. Finally, he reached across the table, his hand finding hers once again. His grip was weak, his voice even weaker. "I don't know what this means yet," he admitted. "But I know this. I can't lose you.
Not now.
Not ever." Her tears spilled freely as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his hand. And in that moment, their love was sealed not with perfection, but with truth. For weeks, Min-joon's life felt reborn. Each day with Abisola carried new joy, each moment a reminder that love had found him in the unlikeliest of places. Her laughter filled the once empty mansion, her presence softened the cold marble halls, and even the city's skyline outside seemed brighter when she stood beside him. But peace is a fragile thing. It was a rainy afternoon when the past came knocking. Literally, the heavy iron gates of Min-joon's home opened to a sleek black car. Out stepped Ji-yeon, his ex-wife. The same woman who had walked out on him when he was at his weakest. The woman who left him to die rather than face a life beside a sick man. Now she returned, her heels clicking on the driveway, her face painted with false concern. Min-joon froze when he saw her in the foyer. Old wounds tore open at the sight of her, yet strangely, there was no longing. Only cold remembrance. "Ji-yeon," he said flatly, his voice stripped of warmth. She smiled faintly, tilting her head in that way she always did when she wanted to disarm him. "Min-joon, you look strong again." "I can hardly believe it." "Because you didn't expect me to survive," he shot back. Her smile faltered for a heartbeat, but she recovered quickly. "I made a mistake. I panicked. But now, seeing you alive, I want to make it right." Abisola appeared in the hallway then, her steps quiet but her eyes sharp. She had heard enough to know exactly who this woman was. Ji-yeon's gaze flickered to Abisola, scanning her with thinly veiled disdain. "And this must be the nurse," she said coolly. "The one who saved you." Min-joon's jaw tightened. "Her name is Abisola. Show some respect." Ji-yeon's lips curled into a smirk. "Respect? For someone who doesn't belong in your world." Abisola's chest burned, but she remained silent, her dignity speaking louder than any retort. Ji-yeon turned back to Min-joon, her tone shifting from scorn to sweet manipulation. "Let me come home. I know I hurt you, but I was scared. You're alive because of her, yes, but you and I, we have history. We built an empire together. Don't throw that away for a fling." Min-joon's eyes turned icy. "A fling?" He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "She gave me her kidney. She gave me her heart. When you abandoned me to die, she saved me. If anyone belongs here, it's her." But Ji-yeon wasn't finished. She leaned closer, lowering her voice like a snake preparing to strike. "If you don't take me back, Min-joon, I'll tell the world everything. That you're weak, that your empire is being run by a man with a failing body. Investors will panic. The board will turn against you. And her," she glanced at Abisola with venom, "her name will be dragged through every headline. Do you want that?" The room went silent. Abisola's breath caught. She had faced many battles in her life, but not the cruel, calculated venom of someone like Ji-yeon. Min-joon's fists clenched, his pulse pounding. For years, power and reputation had been his shield. Now it was being used as a weapon against him, and against the woman he loved. He looked at Abisola. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with trust. She wasn't afraid of scandal. She wasn't afraid of the world. But she was afraid of losing him. Min-joon turned back to Ji-yeon, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You left me when I was dying. Now you come back, not with love, not with remorse, but with blackmail. Ji-yeon, you've underestimated me. My empire isn't built on fear. It's built on strength, and I've never been stronger than I am now. Because I have her." Ji-yeon's smirk faltered, her eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this." "No," Min-joon said firmly. He stepped forward, his voice like thunder. "The only thing I regret is ever letting you into my life." Abisola reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. The warmth of her touch anchored him. Together, they stood as Ji-yeon's face hardened with fury. "You'll come crawling back," she hissed. "They always do." With that, she turned on her heel, her heels striking the marble floor like gunshots, and disappeared into the storm outside. The door slammed shut. Silence filled the mansion once again. Min-joon turned to Abisola, his shoulders heavy but his gaze clear. "I won't let her touch what we have," he said softly. Abisola placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of the heart that now carried a piece of her. "Let her try," she whispered. "We've already survived death. What can she do to us?" But as the rain poured outside and the city lights flickered in the distance, both of them knew Ji-yeon was not finished. And the love they had fought so hard to protect would now face its greatest test. The storm Ji-yeon promised came swiftly. Within days of her dramatic return, whispers began circulating in boardrooms and trading floors. Investors grew restless. News outlets carried rumors of instability at Min-joon's conglomerate. Stocks wavered. And behind it all, The invisible hand of Jiyeon's father moved with cold precision. Her family had always been powerful, one of the oldest dynasties in Korea's business world. When Jiyeon threatened to dismantle Min-joon's empire, it wasn't idle talk. She began leveraging her father's influence, calling in favors, and persuading allies to withdraw their support from Min-joon's upcoming merger. At the center of it all, Min-joon stood calm, though storms raged around him. He had been through worse, not in business, but in life. He had faced death itself, and he knew what mattered most now wasn't the empire he built, but the family he was beginning to build with Abisola. Still, the war Jiyeon waged could not be ignored. One morning, Min-joon walked into a tense boardroom. Executives muttered nervously, papers shuffled, and the atmosphere was heavy with doubt. At the head of the table, Min-joon stood tall, his voice steady. Yes, Jiyeon is trying to sabotage us. Yes, her father is pulling strings. But I ask you, is this company built on fear or on vision? I will not bend to blackmail. If any of you wish to walk away, the door is open. But if you stay knowing this. I will rebuild, with or without their support. A heavy silence followed. Some looked down, uneasy. But others, those who had seen his leadership through storms before, nodded slowly. They would stay. Meanwhile, Jiyeon was relentless. She appeared on business channels, painting herself as the abandoned wife, the rightful partner, the one betrayed. She whispered poison into the media, casting Abisola as an opportunist who had entrapped the billionaire during his weakest moment. The world loved scandal, and soon Abisola's name was on headlines she had never asked for. Cameras began following her. Whispers followed her daughter at school. One night, Abisola sat by the window, tears brimming in her eyes. Min-joon, maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong in your world. Look what she's doing to us, to my child. Min-joon knelt in front of her, lifting her chin, so she met his gaze. His voice was soft but unshakable. You saved my life, Abisola. You gave me a future. And now she thinks she can take that away with lies and power?
No.
I faced death, and I came back because of you. I would rather lose my empire than lose you. Her tears spilled, but this time they carried relief. She threw her arms around him, holding him as tightly as if she could shield him from the storm outside. The next day, Min-joon made his choice public. At a press conference, reporters filled the room, cameras flashing like lightning. Jiyeon's allies whispered that this was his downfall. But when Min-joon stepped onto the stage, his presence silenced the chaos. He spoke clearly, his words carrying the weight of truth. Yes, I was sick. Yes, I was abandoned. And yes, I survived because of one woman, Abisola. She gave me her kidney. She gave me her love. She is the reason I stand here alive. If anyone doubts her, you doubt me. If anyone dares shame her, you shame me. Gasps echoed. Cameras clicked furiously. Min-joon's voice grew firmer. As for Jiyeon and her father's threats, let them withdraw their money. Let them walk. My company is not a toy for dynasties to play with. It is built by vision, by strength, and by people who believe in tomorrow, not by those who blackmail their way into the past. The room erupted in noise, reporters shouting, flashing bulbs firing, but Min-joon's message was clear. He chose Abisola, and no amount of wealth or power could change that. The fallout was swift. Jiyeon's father pulled back, but not without consequence. Stocks dipped. Investors scattered. Min-joon's company trembled on shaky ground. But where others saw collapse, Min-joon saw freedom. He rebuilt with loyal partners, smaller but stronger, no longer chained to the old dynasties. And through it all, Abisola stood by his side. Months later, in the quiet garden of his home, Min-joon held Abisola's hand as her daughter played among the flowers. The little girl's laughter filled the air, a sound more precious than any stock price. Abisola looked at him, her eyes shining. You gave up everything for me. For us. He smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. No, Abisola. I gave up nothing. I gained everything. A second chance at life. A woman who loves me. A daughter who makes me laugh. This, he gestured at the garden, at the little girl twirling in the sunlight. This is wealth. This is my empire now. Abisola's heart swelled, and tears traced her cheeks as he kissed her softly. Far away, Ji-yeon watched their lives from the shadows of her own loneliness, her schemes crumbling. Power had been her weapon, but love had defeated her. And for Min-joon, Abisola, and her daughter, the storm had passed. What remained was peace, love, and a future they would build together. Not on blackmail or fear, but on truth, sacrifice, and the kind of love that even death could not destroy. Thank you for watching this story of love and sacrifice. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more emotional stories here on K-Whisper. Until next time, keep your heart open to the whispers of love.